Welcome everyone, it's Michael DeHaan from Quantum Leap Global. I've got Jessica Schubert with me today. How are you, Jessica?
I'm really well, thank you, Michael. How are you?
Excellent, and thank you. I suppose I connected with you, and I suppose we've just got so much in common around our sort of values and what we're doing. And I asked whether you'd be a part of this Women's Empowerment Series, which is around using your voice and visibility. So, and you said yes straight away, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
I just want a bit of a background. So you're the founder and executive coach of Intact Teams, and you've been doing that for just under 3 years.
Yeah, I've been coaching for a little bit longer, but Intact Teams was founded 3 years ago. That's right.
And I just love, I did a bit of stalking on you, and I just love some of the references that you make on your social media. So your passion to help people realize their potential, be happier, more confident, more resilient, and really learning about yourself. And I see that. I'm just talking to so many people where I think we're moving away from external into internal, which we'll chat about later. But I thought to begin with, it'd just be lovely to learn a bit more about yourself personally, and then we'll talk about other things.
Of course, yeah. Well, you can probably tell from my last name, but certainly when you start trying to pick up my slightly strange accent, I'm calling from Melbourne and I live here, but I'm not from Australia. I was born and raised in Germany, 50 kilometers just outside of Cologne. So I'm a country girl. And I grew up very protected where I lived, with lots of freedom, a wonderful family, a sister, a mum and her partner, you know, and went through school there and spent a year in Australia actually after high school and then came back. I think something that's shaped me and that's interesting for people to hear and, you know, who makes me who I am is that we lost our dad really early. So when I was 8 years old, and the, you know, to be able to deal with this and deal with the grief of my mum, but also, you know, being able to get a handle on life straight away. My sister and I grew up right away, very quickly, because we had, you know, typical 80s kids had the key, you know, on a chain around the neck. And we're just really left to our own devices. And we had to, because, you know, mum had to go to work. And I look back to that time very often because I try to find out what is it in me that makes me, that's shaped, you know, the person I am. And I think it's made me really resilient, although that was tested last year and this year. And it made me fiercely independent. And that sort of shaped the future of, you know, going off after high school and living 20,000 miles away from home, you know, working as an intern here in Melbourne and, you know, driving on the other side of the road. You know, that was before GPSs and mobile phones, of course, as well. So I spent a whole year here in Australia and went back to Germany, did my schooling, started work there, and and then moved on 20 years ago and have done lots of traveling and lots of change.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it'd be interesting, I suppose, that upbringing you shared, that it was around growing up quickly, and that sort of resilience, which is just a word now a lot of people don't resonate with or sort of don't understand because it's certainly internal. So it'd be great just to, I suppose, share a bit of a journey on some of the clients that you're looking after, maybe in particular women who I think maybe have lost their intuition, resilience, whatever's that light inside.
Yeah. Look, resilience, you know, for me really is to be able to bounce back from something that's, you know, that's hard for us. That's also being able to, you know, realign your negative thoughts and change the story in your head, and really change to be able to have, you know, the power and being empowered, you know, to move forward. Often we sort of sit in struggle, and it's really hard for us to move on because our brain tries to, you know, waits for that moment to be happiness, called the happiness movement. And and I work with many leaders, and in particular female leaders, you know, around those issues. What's holding you back from moving on, but also how can you fill your bucket? So in the last 18 months, that's become a lot more prevalent because we are, you know, by, you know, the outside factors, and it's, you know, the pandemic that comes with everything else. We're just thrown into situations now where we need resilience, and it's much harder to find and to build. And I think, you know, Michael, I had a complete turn on, how I was looking to resilience, and I'm helping a lot of clients with this now. Because last year, 15th of March, we all remember that day when the pandemic was declared.
Yes.
I found very little sleep. I was very stressed. I was faced with very little unpaid work for some time, of course, because my, workshops were cancelled. And I just couldn't get back into that state of my, normal self being where I could brush myself up and just move on. That's, what I used to do. And I said to myself, Jess, why is this happening? You're a resilient person. Why can't you be resilient now? And I learned that when you look at resilience through a systems lens, so look at the systems that we are made of and that are in our life, and put them into sort of a wheel, and do little sort of cake pieces.
Yes.
Because we are part of a system where, it's our personal life, our health, our family, our work. It could be finance, it could be, mental health, money. I know that's, one of your topics where you really help people. They don't stand alone, but they're part of a system, but they all come with different challenges. And resilience, when we look at it from a systems point of view, and we go into the different systems and really look into, okay, what is going wrong? Why can't I move on from here? And what kind of tool would help me? We can't, paint everything with the same brush. So it's sort of the wheel of well-being. And, when you paint it out and you see, okay, some of my systems are quite full and I am resilient, but I actually need a different approach here. So for me, that was setting boundaries at home, not let work seep into everything, being financially stable and actually just look at cash flow, being mentally and physically healthy. So I use a different approach with my clients now to be able to really figure out where does the lack of resilience sit in which system, and how can we fill it up. It's much easier than just looking at resilience, from this macro point of view.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I love that wheel. I actually wrote down the wheel of well-being, and then you said it, so that was really interesting.
Yeah, great.
That was great.
Yeah, amazing.
And what resonated with me is that sort of sitting in struggle.
Yes.
And that's a part of maybe someone's belief systems, programming, and sometimes it's easier to sit and struggle as opposed to going outside that comfort zone and really learning about yourself and that growth story, which I suppose you see, and that's a part of your leadership, getting people to really understand their true self.
That's right.
And to be their best.
It starts with lead self, Michael.
Yes, yeah. And do you find a lot of people, because that's what I'm finding, is that they're looking always at that external sense there for validation, for acceptance. What sort of work would you do with women in particular around that? Because I think that's a really strong sense that I'm seeing now, that they're a little bit lost and again always looking at that external sense. But
yeah, absolutely. The kind of work I do is really through, programs, Women in Leadership through Business Women Australia, and, the work I do within organizations, but one-on-one coaching as well. Yeah. And I have lots of great practical tools for women, and I think they're just as important, because often it's, they come to me and say, look, I'm really good at what I do, but I walk into this boardroom full of, excuse me, Micah, but middle-aged white males.
Yes, yeah.
And I just don't believe in myself anymore. And the work, and it's just not easy enough to say, well, just be more confident. You know what you're doing. That's not helpful. So we need some of those practical tools that can really do and apply. But it does start with, looking at, why do they need the validation, if that's the case? And it's not with, every woman. Again, I think we need to be careful to, box people in. Yes. But everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own struggles and their own, challenges. And it's really about having a conversation for them to be able to, step out of that struggle. And I call it the balcony view. And it's a, coaching technique where, you get them to sit on a balcony and have the inner critic and the inner champion, talking to each other, and they have a conversation, but they're taking themselves out of it. Because what a lot of people do, in women in particular, they think they are the problem, where it's just a challenge. And if you can sort of take that out, of yourself, so you step out to look inside, that's really helpful. But the challenges vary a lot. Yeah, some of them are lack of self-confidence because there's a need for validation, and others, just don't believe that they're good enough. A lot of women believe that they should be promoted, judged, and assessed on merit. Yeah, men seem to be better at selling themselves and having that narrative. And that's where then we go into the more practical work I do with women.
Yeah. And I think what you shared before around that sort of boardroom where it's very sort of male dominated culture, and even the businesses that I talk to say that we're big on that sort of inclusion, but it's whether it's conscious or subconscious, it's inclusion in our framework. So I always find that an interesting word where, as I said, when you're looking from within, you can actually tell the inclusion, or you can feel whether it is true inclusion for women and minorities and men to feel heard.
Absolutely.
To be able to share their creativeness.
Yes.
And not to be judged. So I found that really interesting. And so what would be some tips there in particular around supporting someone in that boardroom sense? And I was speaking with coaches before, and it's just how you walk in, how you stand, how you present yourself. But it'd just be great to get one or two practical tips that we could take away with.
Yes, I mean that they're all the practical tips of I'm a little I challenge the power stance before in the sense of, is that actually working for you? Yeah, it works for some people. Yeah, so going to the toilet and raising your arms. I think a move within our bodies and a change within our body is easier to achieve than a change in our mind. Yeah, so it quite often helps. But the work I do is we'll find out where change sits within the body. Yeah, sometimes for some people it's in their wrist, and that's why you sometimes see people having a wristband. Often it sits sort of top of the chest. That's for me. So for me, it's about breathing, and it's about breathing out, not breathing in, because when you breathe out properly, that's when you can breathe in. Or it sits within the core. So being able to focus your energy on there, that's really helpful. So it is about, sort of changing to how can you get that confidence back before you step into that room? And again, that counts for everyone, right? Because, for me, really, Michael, confidence is an emotion or the notion of having that feeling to have a right to be here. Yeah, I have a right to be here. I have a right to speak up. I have a right to challenge. Yeah, having the right to. And how can we get ourselves to believe that we have the right to? And something that really helps, and a really practical tip, is to remind yourself before you go into that meeting how you add value to the team, to your colleagues, to the project, to your company, or to your industry. Now, so doing that exercise overall, and that's part of sort of the personal brand work I do with women in particular. How do you help people? How do you add value? That really helps your confidence to realize, actually, I add a lot of value here. I have the right to be here. And it's a really good affirmation and reminder before you go into a meeting. And that's helped a lot of women I work with.
Wow. That's such a powerful statement. And I felt the energy there with like having that right. And everyone has that right.
That's right.
Wow. I've never heard it said like that before. So I appreciate that. Again, very powerful, very empowering. So what advice would you give a young 19-year-old Jessica going into the corporate world or going into the business world, and how they're showing up, this voice and visibility? What would be some tips there for younger women in regard to how they show up and be their best selves?
Yes. Wow, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. And I work with a lot of younger women, a lot of high potentials. They would have some experience, but they're sort of on that verge of figuring out who they are. First of all, I would say to certainly that age group at 19, you don't have to have it all figured out. Don't look at someone who's 45 and has an amazing executive presence and all this experience. Don't compare yourself to them. Yeah. Women have to stop comparing themselves, you know, with women who are in a very different, in a very different point of their journey. You know, be yourself, learn from others. Yeah. Have an open mind and curiosity, I think, is one of the biggest skill sets and strengths you can have. You know, have a growth mindset, learn from mistakes. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Ask lots of questions and observe people who are really good at how they lead, and be open to that. So curiosity mindset is really good, but don't overthink it. You know, this whole pressure of, being successful in, whatever that looks like in that particular industry. It's your own journey. Define your own success. What is success for you? And have fun on the way. Change is happening so fast. Jobs are changing, industries are changing. Don't lose yourself in that pressure cooker that we are in right now. But be curious and read a lot. Start reading stuff that interests you, or where that's going to bring me further. So I'm not saying you sign out of Instagram ever, but less Instagram, more books.
Yeah. And I love when you said you don't have to have it all figured out. I think that's, again, just so powerful. So some things that you're sharing there, so we can look at that and listen to that, and that a lot of that will resonate. A curious mindset, which is always looking at ways to grow, and what are you doing internally, or how are you supporting yourself to be your best.
Yeah. Do you know what I would say to myself 19-year-old?
Yeah.
Get quite clear, have some clarity around your core strengths early on. Yeah. And I didn't do that work in my 20s. I started doing that work in my 30s, and certainly now. And I do a lot of work around this, because when you are clear on your strength and you build on your strengths, you can grow exponentially. The problem with strengths and weaknesses is that we've been brought up, schooled, and led by focusing on our weaknesses. In school, when you have, an A in English and German and a D in maths, where the energy goes from the
exactly
and the parents. It's always on the D. Yeah. Find the strengths out of the A's that help you to make the D irrelevant. So don't fail school, but make it irrelevant. Yeah. Trying to, when you're, bad at something, and that, it sounds a little superficial, but when there's a part that's really challenging for you, trying to get better just means that you're probably less bad. You're never going to be brilliant at it. Because when you focus on your strengths and you know what they are, and they're transferable as well, that's exponential growth. And I wish I'd known that in my 20s. I think my career would have probably gone a little bit different, and I would have been a happier person.
And I think I'm gonna be a bit vulnerable here, but we just went through that exercise. So I'm on the other side of 50, and we just went through that exercise, I'm going to say 4 weeks ago.
Right.
And how empowering. So my wife and I sat down, and because there was blocks in the business, there was energy blocks. And then when we went through the exercise of our strengths and weaknesses and worked out where our weaknesses were, and just said, well, what do we need to do? And we're looking to outsource that. So that's a lot of, the black and white stuff, getting that stuff done, so we can, be passionate, be creative, and build the business. And so we've worked out, we're talking to people around, we've labeled everything that we want to outsource that drags our energy, and that's uplifting already. So we're saying, okay, we package that up, we're going out to people on who we can bring in that loves doing that.
Yes.
And then that's a win-win, and it allows us to focus on our strengths, and it's a totally different energy.
Yes. And that comes from the inside. That's not an outside, that's working, with what's going on with you. So by outsourcing it, you're making it irrelevant. And look, I say to everyone, who runs their own business, or certainly also when you work somewhere, 25% of either your business or your work doesn't light you up. You don't like, Yes. But 75% of your job, your career, your work, should light you up. Strengths are not just things that you're good at. Strengths are activity that make you feel strong. Weaknesses are also activities that make you feel weak. So you can be really good at something, but it doesn't light you up. You know, I was a salesperson for a very long time, Michael, and at some stage I realized I can't do it I don't want to do it anymore. I'm good, but I'm sort of at the end of this. Yeah, I need to make a change. And that's how I got into leading people, because that was where I really felt my energy and my strengths.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And it's, as I said, what we're going through at the moment, that authentic leaders, that adaptive or conscious leaders, there's terminologies there, but it's just a space now where people can be more authentic. And they can show up, because everyone's been quieter, everyone's looked internally, and they're saying, what do I really want?
Yeah.
How do I want to show up? And that's exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think we are at a real inflection point. So, you know, when we talk about the reality that, you know, is happening right now, you know, in my book, Lead the Future, that's published in September, I'm actually starting the first, there's the 12 skills to lead the future. The first skill is strength-based leadership. And it's really about, you know, looking inside, doing the exercise that you and your wife did. Yeah.
Yes.
How can you lead the future if you don't know what your strengths are? It's, you know, we've got to lead self first before we lead others, lead change, and then lead the future. And for women, you know, in particular, but, you know, everyone who, you know, works, runs their own business, volunteers, you know, start from the inside. Start with that.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. And what was the book name again? I went to write it down, but I wasn't.
Oh yeah, the book is called Lead the Future, and it's based on the 4 pillars of lead self, lead others, lead change, lead the future, the 12 skills to lead in a fast changing and ambiguous world. And you know what, where it came from was last year, you know, when I went through hardship, and I sat there and I'm like, wow, if you know, if I don't know how to get my resilience, and if I'm struggling and, you know, and still struggle, you know, we're still, you know, in, you know, situations where we are creating, you know, the next normal, so to say, you know, working in this, you know, remote hybrid world. With all these outside factors, I'm like, if I struggle, everyone else will struggle as well. So I called some of my clients, and, you know, we pulled together some, you know, learning programs for them and their teams. And, you know, and I started shifting my blogs to, you know, helping people with insight. So, you know, at some stage I'm like, you know, there's so much to share. I'm going to put this together in a book. So yeah, I'm now publishing it, and it's a real practical guide with insights and tips and tools how to lead well, you know, now. It's not a book about the future of work as such, but it's part of it. And of course, what happened since last year when, you know, the pandemic was declared.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to reading that. I think it's very, very well needed. So, so if you're going to give one tip, one leaving tip, what would that be in regard to where we are now? Resilience. I suppose that looking at that inner strength there, what would be that one nugget that you'd leave women that are sort of listening to this?
I think my big word has changed over the last month or so. And I think, you know, it's not practical tips. I think it's optimism. I think we are, whilst we feel like, especially in Australia right now, we're in a, you know, in a pressure cooker, more than half the nation is in lockdown. Yeah, I know it's tough. But in general, we are at an inflection point in the world where we can make real change. Yeah. There's the environment as well. You know, big news there over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think if I can encourage every single person to use optimism and a curious mindset, and you don't have to change the world, yeah, just change the environment around yourself. Start with yourself. Yeah, there's an inflection point of being able to have the opportunity to create something that's quite new. You know, we can reset our home, how we live our lives and our careers. Yeah, and our boss is asking us as well, you know, how do you want to work? How's this hybrid world, you know, remote work gonna work? Yeah, we have a lot of say in this as well. We've got, especially for, you know, leaders in charge, we are at an inflection point. We can be optimistic, and it's up to us. Just start with your own circle, your own family, and your own team.
Wow. And that's sort of controlling what you can control.
That's
right.
And
how you show up every day. So, wow. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And again, thank you for being a part of the series. I was looking forward to interviewing you because I knew there'd be so much value, and you just provided so much of yourself and so much of your what's going on within. So again, I appreciate that. It makes a difference to One me, I always learn, but also to people that will watch this. So thank you, Jessica, for your time.
You're absolutely welcome, Michael.